All right, so we're going to move on to the final chapter that we're going to cover for this semester, and that would be Chapter 9. And Chapter 9 deals with something called queuing models. So let's talk about what is a queue. Let's start there. What is a queue? Okay, very good. A queue is a line. So we don't typically use the word queue, but in European countries, that's typically what they call waiting on queue, like waiting in line at the grocery store, at the bank, whatever it is. So in this chapter, we're going to learn how to study queues. Who would be concerned with studying queues? Lines. What kind of organizations or people would be concerned with studying lines? Queues, yes, sir.
Any kind of business that you make people wait or people that are waiting.
Okay. So any kind of business that makes people wait. So you think about it, banks, you wait in line at a bank, grocery stores, convenience stores, Disney World, right? They're experts at queue analysis. Anything where we have people waiting for service, okay? And there's a big study of this, right? It's a very important thing because what happens if you wait too long for something? I'm very impatient. I'm one of the most impatient people I know. You may leave and never come back, right? And there's a goodwill loss there, right? There's something called a goodwill loss, and we're going to study that. So before we do, though, we kind of have to study queuing in general. Okay, so let's start there before we take a break, and then we'll get into the math of queues. So queuing is the studying of waiting lines or queues. Our objective in these situations is to design a system, that enables an organization to perform optimally according to some criteria. For example, maybe we want to maximize profits. Maybe we don't care so much that people have to wait in line because we just want to hire less people. But these people aren't going anywhere. We're the only game in town, right? So monopolies maybe operate like that. Or maybe we say, hey, we're a convenience store, so this transaction better be convenient. If it takes more than 2 or 3 minutes, then they're not going to come back because they're in a hurry. Okay, so maximum profits, desired service level, all these things are things that we may look at as we look at queues for our organization. So when we analyze a queue, it's not really easy to do. Okay, queues require clear understanding of the approximate or the appropriate service measures. So here are some service measures that we're going to look at. Okay, some ways we can measure the queue, and there's very high-end mathematical formulas behind these, but we're not going to use those. Okay, we're going to use a template for this, but I do want you to understand these performance measures. The first one is the average time a customer spends in line. Is it 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 hours? That's something we want to look at. The average length of the waiting line, sometimes that's even a turnoff, right? If there's too many people in line, you maybe leave that line, go somewhere else. That's called balking, by the way. We'll study that as well. The probability that an arriving customer must wait for service. So what's the percentage of people that have to wait, and what's the percentage of people that get served right away? So when we look at the queuing process, okay, here is how all queues function. So we're going to start by thinking about a queue. All queues function this same way. Things arrive at a queue. If we think about it, there's some arrival process. Okay, so things, people, whatever they might be, arrive in our queue some way. Okay. In the queue, we have rules of the queue, right? We have rules in our queue. For example, they may have something called tandem queues. A tandem queue is you have to wait in one line and then another line, right? Like you do at the airport, right? You go through security, then you wait in line for this. Maybe at the emergency room, right? You wait in line to be seen, and you wait, those kind of things. So those are called tandem queues. There may also be priority rules. There may be, 4 servers. There may be 5 servers. There may be different configurations for the lines. The queue may be operating, servicing 30 customers an hour or 40 customers an hour, but there are different characteristics to this process, this system, if you will, yes? Okay, so there's service in this. And then hopefully, so the service occurs, and hopefully we have things exiting the queue, and hopefully we have, we can make profit and make people happy along the way, all right? So let's talk about defining some of those things. And I'm gonna come back to this, okay? I'm gonna come back to this because I want to talk about just characteristics of a queue first, okay? So let's talk about like the waiting line characteristics. And here are some terms that we are going to define before we start talking about the arrival pattern. I know it's kind of a little bit different, but first of all, we're going to talk about something called line configuration. Okay? We may have something called a single service queue. So a single service queue means one waiting line and like one server. I'm trying to think of a good example of that.
Starbucks.
Okay, one waiting line, one server. Yeah, pretty much, right? Yeah, one line, right? Yeah. Okay, so Starbucks. I don't go to Starbucks, but pretty much one line, one server. Okay, so that's a single service queue. Multiple service queues with a single waiting line. And I don't go to the banks much anymore because of ATMs and online banking. But a lot of times banks work that way, right? You're in one line, maybe they had 4 tellers, and they say, I'll take the next person in line. Okay, that would be an example of multiple service queues with one waiting line. Okay, you guys understand they used to have the ropes. Banks kind of changed from that a little bit, but that's where they were at one point. Multiple service queue with multiple waiting lines. So an example of this would be when you go to Walmart, right? They have 24 registers, so that means that's 24 service queues, 24 service lines. A tandem queue is a multi-stage service system. I mentioned that already, like the emergency room, like airports. Anything where you wait in a line for service, get served, and then go into another line. That's a tandem queue. We try to analyze those as 2 separate queues. Some terms that we want to define of these queues: jockeying and balking. Okay, these can screw up our queue. Okay, they can screw up our analysis of the queue. Jockeying is when customers switch a line once they perceive that another line is moving faster. You can see this behavior any time at Walmart, right? You think that line is moving faster, that clerk is handling things faster, so people switch from that line to another line. That's called jockeying, right? Balking is even worse. Balking occurs if customers avoid joining the line when they perceive the line to be too long. They say, I'm not going to wait in that line. See, this is dismal. I'm not going to wait 90 minutes to ride this damn thing, right? So they balk at the whole situation. Okay, so those are some terms. Priority rules. And I guess probably those in accounting are very familiar with priority rules. I guess these apply to payments as well. First come, first serve. Most of the time lines work that way. You were here before me, you get served before me. Last come, first serve. Very rarely, because we believe in justice, do queues work that way. Sometimes we serve things according to an estimated service time. A lot of times, we break those into separate queues. Like if you ever go in a bank and if you have a deposit or a quick transaction, you might just go to the teller. But if you want to talk about your investment goals and your will and things like that, maybe you go sit down with someone in the corner, right? So sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes random selection of customers for service. More often or not, these kinds of things apply to like computer queues, like computer network queuing of computer networks, where these last two kind of apply more to that. Because in the dominant form of queuing system when it deals with human customers is first come, first serve, right? That's just our sense of justice, right? That, hey, I was here before you, okay? Tandem queues, we already talked about tandem queues. Homogeneity. Homogeneity is how alike are all the customers' populations in this queue, okay? A homogeneous customer population is one in which customers require essentially the same type of service. You can see, they try to do that a little bit at Walmart. They say, hey, this express line, these are 20 or under people, so they require about the same type of service. Generally speaking, like sometimes 1 item, sometimes 19 items. And here are the big orders go this way. So homogeneity has to do with like how things are the same, okay? The degree of sameness among the customers. A non-homogeneous customer population is one in which customers can be categorized according to different arrival patterns or different service treatments. You know, one takes longer to serve than the other, okay? The service process, okay? In most business situations, service time varies widely among customers. When service time varies, it is treated as a random variable. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about queues, and we're going to talk about arrival versus service. So when we talk about arrival, this is how things arrive at our queue. And one way can be something called deterministic. Okay, this means it's determined. It's not random at all. For example, an assembly line, if things are coming in an assembly line into your service area, maybe they're arriving at 1 unit every 2 minutes, right? It's very determined, right? 1 unit it's an assembly line, 1 unit every 2 minutes. Oftentimes, doctors' offices try to make their arrival pattern deterministic. How do they do that? Schedule appointments, right? They say, every 5 minutes I have an appointment schedule. When I do advising with my students, I try to make it deterministic, right? So I'm not overwhelmed, so it's not random. So deterministic is one way, okay? So things can arrive according to a determined pattern that really doesn't vary much. But a lot of times they do vary, okay? And when they do vary, there are different probability distributions these things can follow. The one is called general distributions. This is like a family of distributions. Distributions, probability distributions. One family is called general distributions. And probably the most famous general distribution, which I know you guys all know because we studied it when we talked about chapter 5, was the normal distribution. Okay, the normal distribution, the bell-shaped curve. We have a mean and a standard deviation. So things can arrive according to that distribution, right? Maybe on average, 10 people come an hour, but sometimes, when we're real busy, we get 20 per hour, and when we're real slow, maybe we get 1 per hour, right? So it's a bell-shaped distribution. Now, there's another family of distributions that really, in a lot of times, queues follow this family. For whatever reason, these distributions really model well, in this class of distribution, how customer queues work. Like, how do people arrive according to to this distribution at a Sheetz or an Applebee's or Walmart? It's called Markovian. Okay, that's the class of distributions. Markovian is the class of distributions. The one under Markovian, when we talk about arrival patterns, has kind of a French name to it. It's called Poisson. Okay, Poisson. Okay, it is the most common arrival pattern for things that arrive in a service queue, when humans arrive according to a service queue. So we're going to study that in a minute. Okay. The second thing that can happen is things are served according to some service pattern. And that can also be deterministic, right? It can also be, well, it's an assembly line process and it's robotic, and this thing does things always, 1 every 5 minutes or 1 every minute, whatever it might be. A lot of times we try to make the arrival pattern deterministic, but the service pattern isn't, right? Like I talked about advising. I try to make my arrival pattern deterministic, like people come to my office every 10 minutes, but sometimes people tell me all their life story, all their problems, right? It takes me 30 minutes to advise them, and sometimes they have their act together, it takes me 2 minutes, right? Same thing with doctors, right? Sometimes they have a patient that takes 20 minutes and sometimes 2 minutes. So oftentimes we're more likely to have a deterministic arrival pattern than a deterministic service pattern. Does that make sense? It can also follow a general distribution like the normal curve. Okay? But generally speaking, okay, most service patterns also follow a Markovian distribution for their service pattern. And the service, the class or the distribution that they're served at is something called the exponential distribution. Okay, so both the Poisson and the exponential belong to the class of distributions called Markovian. And you need to know that because you're going to see we're going to classify Q's according to that in a moment. Generally speaking, when we're talking about things in the business world, like retail environments, we're usually dealing with an arrival pattern that is Poisson distributed and a service pattern that is exponentially distributed. Now, the measures we use for both of these, hold on to this, we use this symbol, which is called lambda, for Markovian. That's the average arrival pattern, so maybe 10 per hour, 5 per hour, 1 per day, 2 per minute, whatever it might be. That goes by lambda, okay, that arrival rate. And we use mu for the service rate. We can serve 2 per hour, 5 per day, 1 per week, 6 a minute, something like that. So we try to identify lambda and mu. So I'm going to stop there because that's kind of a good stopping point. But all we've done so far with these Q's is we've said, all right, we have these Q's. There are some traits of these Q's. Things arrive according to some arrival pattern. There's some kind of characteristic about the way we serve them. And there's some kind of service pattern. And generally speaking, most are Markovian. Okay? Generally speaking, most are Markovian. So when we come back, we'll start dissecting these things in a little more detail. Okay. So we know we have these things called Q's. We know that Q's are different. They can be configured differently. Things can arrive at them differently. They can be served differently. All these kinds of things go along with that. So one of the first things we want to do when we are shown a queuing problem is we need to classify the queue. Okay, and we're going to use five things to classify. The first one is the arrival process. The second thing is the service process. The third thing is the number of servers, so like the number of tellers or the number of checkout lines, the system size, and the population size. Okay, so the notation we use for this looks like this. So we have 5 spaces separated by 4 slashes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. The first space is the arrival pattern. Okay, so if things are arriving according to a deterministic pattern, we put a D there, right? So a D means deterministic. If things are arriving according to a general distribution, we put a G here. But more often than not, things arrive to a queue according to a Poisson process, and we use an M for Markovian. Okay, so if things are arriving according to a Poisson process, that first classification is M. The second thing is the service process, and once again, the service process can be Markovian, deterministic, or general. Exponential, remember exponential is the one that's probably the most common. It is also under the class of Markovian, So the second character is typically an M as well. The third thing we classify is the number of servers. And the way they say K number of servers, okay, which, well, K is like the variable that is typically used for servers. So K number of servers. So if things are arriving according to a Poisson process, they're being served according to an exponential process, and we have 6 servers, it would be an MM6Q. Okay, that's how we classify it. It's an MM6. An MM3 would be Poisson exponential 3 servers. An MM1, Poisson exponential 1 server. Now these last two are not as commonly used, okay? And a lot of times we omit them, and if we omit them, we assume they're infinite. Even though they really can't be infinite, they're big enough that we can assume they're infinite, okay? So the fourth characteristic is the system size. And I guess before we understand what the system is everything that encapsulates the people being served and the people waiting in line. So if I have let's say a good example of this, let's say I have 4 lines, and maybe I have 2 tellers or two operators answering those lines. Okay, the number of servers would be 2, but I only have 4 telephone lines. I'm talking telephone lines here when I say line. I only have 4 telephone lines. So at this time, only 4 people at any given time can be in my system. Does that make sense? So I know Walmart in Evansburg isn't infinite. We can't have an infinite amount of people in there, right? We're waiting in line and being served. But for all practical purposes, we can assume it to be infinite. If for some reason we have a situation where the queue is limited, the system is limited in size, we give it a number there. Like if this were, we only have 4 dial-in lines, well then it would be an MM24 queue, right? Where 4 is the biggest, the most amount of people that can be in that queuing system at any given time. Most of the time, however, we assume that it's infinite. Does that make sense? So most of the time it's omitted. Okay, so this is what we call the system size. And the fifth one is the population size. And most of the time, the same thing, we assume that to be infinite. The population is the total population of things that can enter my queue. Now I know someone from Bolivia isn't likely to enter the Evansburg Walmart tonight, someone directly from Bolivia, but we have to assume that it's infinite, okay? A good example of this is, let's say my job is to work on the furnaces in the 8 dorms in Loretto. Well, there's only 8 things that can ever enter my queue. The Lewis furnace, the Giles furnace, the Agnes furnace. So there's only 8 things that could ever enter my queue. So if one of them is already broke, it kind of changes the characteristics, because now there's only 7 things that can enter my queue. Most of the time we assume the population size to be infinite, but not always, right? If I am, maybe I'm a specialist that services aircraft carriers, and the United States government maybe has 4 aircraft carriers, I don't know. So that is a limited population size. Only 4 things could ever come into my queue, right? Only 4 things could ever come into my queue. Most of the time we assume they're in, okay? So we want to classify the queue. So before we measure anything, we want to classify. And this is how we classify the queue, okay? The second thing, and I'm going out of order here, but I think it makes more sense the way I go. The second thing is the queue has to achieve something called steady state, okay? Steady state is when the queue is operating properly. And I'll give you 2 examples when a queue isn't in steady state. The first one is during the startup period, okay? It's called the transient period of a queue. Good example, I've been going to the same barber for, 33 years, something like that, okay? Getting the same damn haircut that I got when I was 12. My kids get the same haircut. I get one of I got when I was 12. But he opens at 8 a.m., okay? And at 8 a.m. there's usually 4 old retired guys waiting outside, right? So in that instant when he opens, 4 people enter his queue. But that's not typical the rest of the day, right? He doesn't typically have 4 people walk in at once or 5 people. So that behavior is not indicative of long-run performance. So a lot of times when a queue starts up, it's not like it normally is. Does that make sense? There's things that are backlogged, that are pushing up, like old man waiting to get a haircut, okay? So that is called a transient period. So steady state occurs after when things are working well. The other thing that we have to achieve steady state is the effective arrival rate must be less than the sum of the effective service rate, okay? So what that's saying is we have to be serving people faster than they're coming in. If we're not, if people are coming faster than we serve them, everything goes helter-skelter, right? If things are backing up, the queue doesn't operate normally because now it just keeps adding to it, so it'll never achieve steady state. So the effective arrival rate must be less than the sum of the effective service rates. So remember I said lambda, okay? Lambda is the arrival rate, and our mu is the service rate. So for it to achieve steady state, lambda has to be less than mu. So we have to be serving things at a faster rate per hour than they're arriving. If that's for one server. If we have multiple servers, then lambda has to be less than all the service rates added up. So if we have 5 servers, knocking things down at 5 an hour, well, this has to be less than 15. Did I say 5? 5 at 5 or 3 at 5? Well, it doesn't matter. So if I said there's 3 people servicing things at 5 per hour, that's an effective service rate of 15 per hour, right? 5 plus 5 plus 5. Okay? So those are the conditions that we have to have. We identify the type of queue we have. We identify that it's in steady state. We identify our lambda. We identify our mu. And then here are the things that we can measure. Here are the measures of this queue that we can use as a manager. The first one is P sub 0, okay? P sub 0. P sub 0 is the probability that there are no customers in the system. And let me explain this again because I don't know how good of a job I did it last time. If I have, let's say I have 2 tellers, 2 service reps, and let's say I have 2 people being served, and I have 4 people total waiting in line. So this is the service people. The people in the system, okay, the people in the system include all 6 of these people. The system includes people waiting in line and people being served, okay? The system includes these 2 that are being served and these 4 waiting in line. Both of these are the system. When I talk about the queue, I only talk about the things or the people waiting in line. So in this case, the queue has 4 people in it, but the system has 6. Does that make sense? So the system's big. The queue is a subset of the system. Okay, so the probability that there are no customers in the system means no one waiting in line and no one being served. No one in our store at all, if you will. Okay, that's P sub 0. P sub n is the probability that there are n customers in the system. So what that n is a general thing. So if it says P sub 1, it's the probability of 1 customer. P sub 2, the probability 2. P sub 3, the probability 3. You get the picture. L is the average number of customers in the system. So the average number of people that are waiting in line and being served combined, right? L is the average number of people in the system L sub Q is the average number of customers in the queue. So average number of customers in the queue is the average number of people in the waiting line, okay, in the waiting line itself. W is the average time a customer spends in the system. So that means the whole system, the average time they spend waiting in line and being served, the whole time they're there, right? Not just waiting in line, but the system, so we're talking waiting in line and being served. If it takes me 5 minutes to wait in line and then 3 minutes to be served, I've spent 8 minutes in the system, right? Because all those times, that whole 8 minutes, I was in the system. W sub Q is a subset of that. It's the average time a customer spends in the queue, meaning waiting in line, right? So my example, I said 5 minutes in line, 3 minutes being served. 5 minutes is the time I spent in the queue, waiting in line. 8 minutes in the system. P sub W is the probability that an arriving customer must wait for service. What's the probability that an arriving customer has to wait? You know, that everyone's busy, all our servers are busy. And finally, this is a very useful one, utilization rate. And that little symbol there is called rho, A-R-H-O, rho. Okay? Rho is the percentage of time that each server is busy. And this depends on the application. If I am at Walmart, they want a rho of nearly 100%, right? They want their checkout people to be busy almost 100% of the time. Maybe at a bank, maybe you don't want a row of 100% because maybe your tellers, your customer service reps have other duties, right? Maybe they're supposed to be reconciling things or maybe trying to upsell customers or processing loans. So it depends, right? It depends what kind of environment you are in and on what kind of row you want. Optimal row for your customer, for your queue. Okay? All right, so that's a lot of intro information. We're going to skip over some of this. Okay, this is something called Little's formula. All of these things, all of these queues, once I identify, classify the queue, I identify the arrival pattern, the service pattern. There are formulas that we can calculate out all of those summary measures, right? Those measures that are of interest to us up here. And there's formulas for all that. Come up with people from, much greater than I have come up with these formulas. We're not going to go drag you through these formulas. We're going to use the template that uses them. Okay, so let's take a look at an example. Okay, these are all the formulas that we don't have to worry about. Let's look at this one. Mary's shoes. Okay, customers arrive at Mary's shoes every 12 minutes on the average according to a Poisson process. Service time is exponentially distributed with an average of 8 times per customer. Management is interested in determining the performance measures for this service system. So, I want you to help me classify this queue first. What is the arrival pattern? It is what? Okay, it is Markovian. What is the service pattern? It's exponential. Exponential belongs to the class of Markovian. And I don't know if it explicitly says this, but if you read the case in your book, all we have working for us at Mary's Shoes is Mary. Okay, so it is an MM1Q. Okay, it's an MM1Q. And I know Mary's Shoes probably doesn't have an infinite size to it, but that's really never a factor. She doesn't, and isn't that much demand where she says, hey, we can't fit anyone in here, right? So we're going to assume it to be infinite, okay? So a couple of things that didn't give us distinctly. It says customers arrive at Macy's Shoes every 12 minutes on average according to a Poisson process. So we get one customer every 12 minutes. And what this is called, and sometimes it's given this way, this is called an inter-arrival time, right? Like on average, one customer every 12 minutes. What I really like though is I'd like to have a rate per hour here. How can I get this to a rate per hour? one customer every 12 minutes, and some of you can just do it in your head, but one customer every 12 minutes, what does that mean? How many per hour? What's the lambda I want to put in here?
5.
Okay, it's 5 per hour. Okay, how did you do that, Adam?
12. 60 divided by 12.
Okay. So Adam says, hey, they told us one customer every 12 minutes, right? So one customer every 12 minutes. And he realized that's a ratio. I'm going to compare that to a ratio. How many for 60 minutes? Because 60 minutes is an hour, right? So when we have a ratio, one customer every 12 minutes, how many per hour? We have a ratio, we want to solve for lambda, cross multiply, 60 times 1 is 60, 12 times lambda is 12 lambda, divide both sides by 12, and we have lambda is equal to 5 per hour. Now if you could just do it in your head like Adam did, that's fine, but if you want to do the math, that's how you do the math, right? It's a ratio. 1 every 12 minutes is the same rate as 5 per 60 minutes. Does that make sense? Okay, how about my service time? How about my service time? Says service time is exponentially distributed with an average of 8 per customer. We know we want it in a mu, and we want it per hour because that's what our service time or arrival time is in. So I'm going to do the same thing. One customer every 8 minutes means how many every 60 minutes, which is an hour. Cross multiply, I get 8 mu is equal to 60. Divide both sides by 8. I get mu is equal to that's 7.5. All right, is it 7.5? Yes, okay. So I have everything I need. I know it's an MM1Q. I also know my lambda is 5, and I know my mu is 7.5. All right, so as I promised, there is a template, and that's what we're going to use for this one. So let's go to chapter 9, and under chapter 9, you'll find a template called Q template. In this workbook, you'll notice various worksheets for the various forms of Qs that we might get. The first one is MMK, which means Markovian, which is Poisson, exponential, Markovian, and K servers, where K could be 1, it could also go the whole way up to, looks like 30. In this case, it's MM1. All I need to do is I enter lambda here. Lambda is 5. Mu is 7.5, okay, and it calculates on all of my results using Little's formula, which we don't need to know, for 1 server, 2 servers, 3 servers, and 4. Now we're just talking about 1 server, so we're going to focus on this row. So Mary's is concerned with her system. Look what information we now have. The average number of people in Mary's store is what? Sorry about that. The average number of people in Mary's store is what? 2. The average number of people waiting in line is 1.33. The average time they spend in the system, either waiting in line or being served, is 0.4. Now what does that mean?
0.4 minutes or 4 minutes.
What do we put in our lambda and mu as? 5 per hour and 7 per hour. So this is 0.4 hours. We don't talk like that, right? Like I don't say, hey honey, I'm going to be home in 0.4 hours, right? Because you'd be like, well, I married a geek, but really he's a real geek. But so how can we get that in terms of minutes? 0.4 hours times 60. So 60 times 0.4 gives me 24 minutes. And that's a better way to state that, right, than 0.4 hours. So 24 minutes is better. 0.26 hours is how long they spend waiting in line. So basically a quarter of an hour, do the mental calculation there, about 15 minutes, right? 0.26 times 60 is going to be about 15 minutes. The probability that a customer must wait at Mary's is about 2/3 of the time they have to wait. And it makes sense since we're dealing with an MM1Q. The probability that Mary is busy, the percentage of time that Mary is busy, is also 67% of the time, right? So when Mary's busy, that's when someone has to wait, when Mary has someone being served. Okay. All of these over here are the probability of this many customers in the system. So the probability that no one is in our system at all is 33% of the time. The probability of one customer in the system is 22%. Two customers, 14.8%. 3, 9.8, 4, 6.5, 5, 4.3, 6, 2.9, so forth and so on. Okay, so this is a pretty, just using understanding the Q we have, understanding lambda, understanding mu, and plugging that in, we're able to calculate out a lot of performance measures. Now, what's nice is this textbook problem, they gave us lambda, they gave us mu. How do you think places like Sheets figure out their lambda and their mu? What do you think they do? Go ahead, what'd you say? Say it.
Sit there and click and.
Sure, they actually, and I know people from Sheets, and is anyone from Sheets in here now? Yeah. They've done queuing analysis studies, yes? No, you're pretty new there.
Yeah.
Okay, but are you aware of that or not? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's outside firms you can hire that will sit around and watch your store, for God's sake, right? They'll observe it. They're like, and they'll say, this is what, and usually you think about it, what's also different about, like, not just the Sheets, but restaurants and malls, is the lambda always 5 per hour or 10 per hour? No, queues are different based on times, right? So there's seasonality to it, if you will, as well. Like, portage Sheets is a lot different from, don't go in there actually, after midnight. But it's a lot different from midnight to 4 a.m. than it is at 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. Right? There's a lot different arrival pattern, a lot different clientele there as well.
Sir, does a parking lot always its own queue?
What's that?
Parking lot, like always its own.
Really, if you were measuring like a convenience store, you would say the system starts not when the person's in the store, like browsing, but they truly only enter the system once they get in line. You know what I mean? So the parking lot, I guess you would say there's a queue like in a Sheets at the gas pumps, right? And there's also a queue at the register, right? So there's multiple queues going on. They're not tandem queues. Sometimes they're sequential queues. I mean, sometimes I pump my gas in and go to get out, at the same time. You're not supposed to do that, it's illegal, but I'm not the only one. So I wouldn't say the parking lot is a queue to itself, though. Okay, it's the system would be waiting in line and being served. Okay, so let's look at a couple others. Okay, these are some other characteristics. Okay, let's look at another example in your book. Littletown Post Office is opening on Saturdays between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. On the average, 100 customers per hour visit the office during that period. 3 clerks are on duty. Each service takes 1.5 minutes on average. Poisson and exponential distributions describe the arrival and process and service process respectively. Evaluate the current service level. Study the effects of reducing the staff by 1 clerk. Okay, so we got to classify this queue first. What kind of queue do we have here?
MM3.
It's an MM3, right? 3 servers currently. Now we need our lambda and we need our mu. What is our lambda? It gave us lambda straight out. We didn't have to do any calculations. Our lambda is 100 per hour. Okay. Our mu is, let's see, we can do each service takes 1.5 minutes on average, so that means, hey, we can do one customer every 1.5 minutes. So how many customers can we do in 60? Well, cross multiply, we have 60 is equal to 1.5 mu. I get mu is equal to 40, okay? So is this gonna be a problem? People are arriving at a rate of 100 per hour, and we're servicing at a rate of 40 per hour. Is it a problem? It wouldn't be a problem if we only had one server, right? Because he is only kicking them out at 40 per hour and they're coming at 100 per hour. That means it'll never achieve steady state. But I think it told us we have a what? An MM3Q, right? An MM3Q. So let's take a look at that. So we go to MMK. Our lambda is 100. Our mu is 40. 40. Okay. And we have 3 servers. So it gives us all our results. It looks like we have about 6 customers at the system at a time, 3.5 waiting in line. The average time in the queue is 0.06 hours. The average time waiting in line is 0.03 hours. The probability someone has to wait is about 70% of the time, and our servers are busy 83% of the time. So it doesn't look like the queue is operating terribly, right? It looks like our people are busy. It looks like the people in line are getting through pretty damn quickly. So they wanted us to evaluate reducing the number of servers by 1 from 3 to 2. So that means go up a line. Well, what do you notice about that line? There's no data there. Why is there no data there? Okay, because if we have 2 servers kicking things out at 40 per hour and things are arriving at 100 per hour, that means my effective service rate is 80 per hour. 80 is less than 100, right? This queue will never achieve steady state. So what's going to happen in this queue? It'll never achieve steady state. It'll just keep growing and growing and growing and growing, and it's going to get unwieldy, and people are going to be upset, and it's not going to be a good functioning queue. Do you guys know what I'm saying? Now, I wouldn't recommend going up to 4 servers either. Why would I not recommend going up to 4 servers? What changes? What changes? Well, things change, right? Average number of people in our system goes from 6 to 3. Average number of people waiting in line goes from 3.5 to half a person. The average time in the queue or in the system goes from 0.06 hours, which is roughly what, 3.6 minutes, to 0.03 hours, which is 1.8 minutes. For a post office, waiting in line 3 minutes, it's probably acceptable, right? Okay. Maybe it's not acceptable at Sheets. I'm not sure what their service levels are, but they might say that's ridiculous. People don't want to wait 3 minutes. But a post office, they're probably like, yeah, what the hell? That's great, right? You're lucky, right? So it depends what it is. Okay, so little town post office is probably appropriately staffed at three clerks. Make sense? Okay, let's look at some others. Let's see. Let's look at this one. No, let's not.
Is that also going to be used to determine cost too? It's efficient to.
That's a great question. We're going to do that next. Yes. Okay. So I told you the last 2 values, system size and population size. A lot of times we just assume them to be infinite. Many times queuing systems have designs that limit their size. When the potential queue is large, an infinite queue model gives accurate results even though the queue might be limited. When the potential queue is small, the limited line must be accounted for in the model. And there's different formulas for this. So let's look at Ryan Roofing Company. Okay, Ryan Roofing Company gets most of its business from customers who call and order service. When a telephone line is available but the secretary is busy serving a customer, a new calling customer is willing to wait until his secretary becomes available. When all the lines are busy, a new calling customer gets a busy signal, and we're assuming calls a competitor. Arrival process is Poisson, and service process is exponential. Hey, that means I have an MM. Each phone call takes 3 minutes on average. That's 1 every 3 minutes. So we're saying, hey, that's, looks like 1 every 3 minutes. I'm just doing that in my head. That's 20 per hour is what we can serve. 10 customers per hour. So that's, gives it to me. Lambda is 10 per hour. That's what they're arriving at. So we're going to need at least 2 servers, it looks like. Oh, no, we're good. 1 appointment secretary takes phone calls from 3 telephone lines. So what kind of queue do I have here? MM is right? Poisson exponential MM. How many servers do I have? Just that 1 appointment secretary, so it's MM1. And here I need something. It's not infinite. What's the system size limited to? How many telephone lines do I have? Okay, so we have an MM13 system. So you're going to see there is a worksheet that looks very similar. We have MMK is what we've been using. Toward the end, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 6th one over says MMKF. I'm going to enter my lambda, arriving at 10 per hour. We're servicing them at 20 per hour. My K is 1. My system capacity is 3. This one tells me there's an average of 0.73 customers in my system, an average of 0.26 customers on hold. We're spending 0.07 hours in the system, 0.02 hours waiting in line. The probability that my appointment secretary is busy is 46% of the time. Probability someone must wait is 46% of the time. Now the important thing here is what percentage of customers are getting a busy signal and hanging up and calling my competitor, aren't even entering my system. What percentage of the time is this system completely full? You can get this through this analysis. What percentage of my time is my system completely full? How many does my system hold? 3. What percentage of time do I have 3 customers in my line? 6%. What if I went up to 4 lines? Now what percentage of my customers are calling and getting a busy signal? Still have 1 appointment secretary. She's still working the same speed. Now what percentage of my customers are getting a busy signal? 3. If I go to 5, now it's 1%, right? And this is, like I said, this text is kind of old. Now with voice over IP systems, this is unlimited, you know what I mean? Because it's all, you guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay, but a good example of an MMKF system. Let's look at this one. Okay. In this system, the number of potential customers is finite and relatively small. As a result, the number of customers already in the system affects the rate of arrivals of the remaining customers. So we have an MM1//, which means infinite system size. But we're going to have a variable here, meaning a finite population size. So let's look at this example. Pacesetter Homes runs 4 different development projects. At each site, running a project is interrupted once every 20 days on the average. The VP for construction handles each stoppage. How long on the average a site is not operational? If it takes 2 days on the average to restart a project's progress, currently, we want to know what if it goes down to 1.875 days. Okay, so before we get into it, what kind of queue do we have here? Poisson exponential, so it's MM, right? How many servers do I have? Just this 1 VP, right? So 1. System size is infinite, but how about the population size? What can enter this VP for construction's queue, if you will? only what? Only 4, right? Only 4 development projects. So, all right, so it's an MM1 //4 cube. Okay, MM1 / meaning that's infinite. If you want to write it out, go ahead, it's infinite. Okay, so let's figure out the lambda. Any site running project is interrupted once every 20 working days. So if that's 1 interruption or 1 thing entering every 20 working days, that means 0.05 per day. I just did that in my head. So lambda is 0.05 per day. It takes them 2 days to service a stoppage. So how many does he do in 1 day? You would be 0.5, right? So we have an MM1 //4 with 0.05 and 0.5. So let's find that one. Oops, that's wrong cube. Wrong one again. There it is. Here it is. MM1 space M. Our lambda is 0.05. Our mu is 0.5. And we only have 4 things that can enter our system. So it gives me all my performance measures. Now, Dylan asked an excellent question. So I'm going to go off slides here a little bit. And we're going to talk about the economic analysis of queuing systems. Okay? So he asked, what factors into how much it costs? Because really, we're talking about performance time, but if you add another server, well, you're adding more salary, right? And maybe you're only changing the characteristics of service time a little bit, so you're really not helping yourself in the end. So we've got to weigh those 2 things against one another. Okay, so the measures we're going to use are this, okay? We need an hourly cost per server. And why that's important is if we're paying these people, let's say $20 an hour, we hire 3, that means I'm accruing $60 per hour in wages. If I hire 4, $80, 5, $100, right? What's happening though when I hire more people? Hopefully. The more production, and so what's happening to things in my system? They're being served faster, right? More efficiently. So what? So what do we think that buys us, right? It doesn't buy us any hard dollars, right? And the salary is definitely hard dollars. Like you're going to demand that money. But what is it buying me with the customer? If I go to Sheets and it takes me 35 minutes to get my MTO, fine. I get my MTO because, I ordered that MTO and I'm going to be hungry later, right? I get it, I leave. Probably didn't cost them anything there. But what's going to happen down the road?
Goodwill loss.
Yeah, next time I'm not going to Sheets. It took too damn long, right? I'll try Subway, right? Pricey though. I'll go to Subway, right? I'll try Subway. Okay? So there's something called goodwill loss or goodwill cost. It's very hard to quantify that, right? It's difficult to quantify because it's not like salary. That's easy to quantify. We can say, hey, $10 per hour, $20 per hour. But goodwill loss is harder to quantify. If we're selling, something minimal, it's probably not a huge loss, but if we're selling yachts, right? And that one customer had to wait too long, he doesn't come back, man, that was probably a huge loss, right? So we want to make sure that we have someone there to serve them. So goodwill cost is something that, I'm not really going to go into nuances of this, but companies have spent a lot of time trying to classify and quantify the goodwill cost of waiting. If you go to Disney World has spent a lot of time on that very topic. Why? When people go to Disney, there's a couple things they say, it's the time of my life, but they typically complain about 2 things. The heat, right? You can't do anything about the heat. Put shade trees up, all that damn stuff, right? The sprinkles, stuff like that, right? The little water shooting things. But the waiting lines, right? That's the second thing that people complain about. So what have they done to try to reduce that goodwill cost while waiting in line? Yes.
They're doing the lines into commodities.
Go ahead. What do you mean by that? You're right.
Yeah, so you can pay another premium cost and
Oh, okay.
you get the jump line.
All right, so a couple things they've done. You're right. If you stay in a Disney resort, I think you get to go early, right? There's also that fast pass thing. You guys know what I'm talking about? So that makes you feel like you have control, and that reduces your goodwill cost. You're like, wow, I'm waiting in 2 lines at once. And it's a mental thing, basically, right? You know what I'm talking about? The fast pass thing. You guys know what I'm talking about? Okay. That was a coup for them. That was a very good thing for them. It really was. What else do they do while you're in line to try to reduce, like, holy cow, I'm in line, it's 98 degrees, my kids, I'm hanging with kids, hanging on. What do they try to do to reduce that goodwill? The entertainment, right? Goofy comes over. How can I be in a bad mood when Goofy's with me, right? So they have Goofy there, or a juggler comes by, or something like that. So that's another way they try to reduce goodwill cost. So let's look at an example. Let's go back to, I just want to look at, I'm just going to wing this, but let's pull out, let's go back to MMK. Okay, let's go to MMK, and I think our lambda was 100. Let's change it to the mu is equal to, I don't know, let's say, yeah, let's leave it alone. Okay. So let's say at this particular example, let's leave it 140. Let's say at this particular example, our servers cost us, I don't know, it's $75 per hour. Okay. So if we hire 3 servers, 3 times 75, 225 is our service per hour. 4 is 300 per hour. Let's say though, for whatever reason, we've said that the goodwill cost for waiting in line is, let's say it's pretty significant. Let's say it's $40 per hour when waiting in line. And do you think when being served is going to be higher or lower? Where's more goodwill loss? Because we're all narcissistic beings. Yeah, when you're waiting, there's a goodwill loss that's higher than when you're being served. Because when you're being served, you're still in the system, and you still might not be happy, right? But at least the attention's on you, right? You know, you ever go to Walmart and it's taking too long, you know, the line's too long, and then the checkout person's too long. But it's worse when the attention's not yours, right? So goodwill cost while waiting is $40. So let's say when being served it's a little less, and we'll say it's 25. Okay. So what this is factoring in then, okay, is it's factoring in both the server cost, and then it's factoring in the goodwill cost when waiting and goodwill cost while being served by multiplying, okay, by the average number of people, the average number of customers waiting in line and the average customers being served. And I'm coming out with these values. So note, okay, if I looked at these values and I'm doing an economic analysis of this queuing system, what's the best number of servers to employ? In this case up here, what's the best number of servers to employ? The most, go ahead Dylan, what? 4. 383, right? Next one's 442, 513, 587. Here's what's happening here. At this point, the goodwill cost when waiting and being served is pretty significant. So not only are we paying $225, but it looks like we're paying another $200 for that goodwill cost, right? Here, hey, we're paying $300, right, for the servers, the tellers, but only $83 in goodwill cost. The next one, hell, we're paying, let's see, 5 times 75, that's $375, and then another $67 in goodwill cost. Now we're paying $400 plus another. So what's happening is, the way this will always go is it'll go down to something, it'll bottom out, and then we're going to get significant or marginal insignificant returns And now the server cost is winning. The server cost is winning. So it's always going to bottom out, and you're always going to find a value like this. So I'll just switch the numbers around. Let's say, I don't know, let's say it's 200, and let's say this is, I don't know, 60. Okay? You'll see in this case it's 5 again. Let's say the server cost, maybe this is, we're selling yachts here, and this goodwill loss is, really significant. Maybe it's, 5, maybe the server cost is still 75, but what did I have the server cost? 75, yeah. But let's say this is significant. Let's say it's 250, and let's say this is 200. Okay, so in this case, it looks like it's still 5. No, it looks like now it's 6. Okay, so you notice in every one of these, it starts high, bottoms out, and then the server cost overtakes, and it goes up and up and up. So you want to choose where it bottoms out. Do you guys know what I'm saying? So it's like a U-shaped curve, and you want to choose the bottom of the U-shaped curve. All right. So if I am, a convenience store versus maybe a utility company or someone else that has kind of a maybe a monopolistic relationship, these kind of things, this goodwill cost matters differently, right? If I'm a convenience store, man, that goodwill cost really important to me. That goodwill cost when waiting, I want to minimize that as much as possible because convenience is in my name, for God's sake, right? They want it to be fast. When you go for, I don't know, not trying to pick on anything, but you go to the Pennsylvania Department of Motor Vehicles, they don't really care how long you wait, right? Where else are you going to go? Huh? That's what, that should be their motto. Where the hell else are you going to go? Right? I shouldn't say that. Someone probably works for them and I'm going to get in trouble. But that's, they don't care as much about service time there. They've gotten a lot better, actually, in the last 20 years since I've gone there. But they don't care as much as a place like Sheetz. All right. That's all I have for this evening. So what I would like you to do, and I will, as I said, prepare the take-home final. I'll email it to you. I'll also put it out here under take-home exams tomorrow. I think I have some time tomorrow morning, and I'll get that done tomorrow morning. But what I'd like you to do for next week is at the bottom or the back of chapter 9. Some of these I'm going to get rid of, so don't do them all. Do number 2, that's fine. Number 4. And 24. 23 and 24. All right, have a good day.